Love has a way of finding you when you least expect it, but what if everything you believed was a lie? Moten was a woman who knew exactly what she wanted: rich, classy, and absolutely no baggage. No man was ever good enough. Then, she met Adisa. Handsome, wealthy, mysterious. A dream come true. Their love story unfolded like a fairy tale: romantic calls, sweet messages, and promises of forever. But fairy tales don't come with plot twists. On her wedding day, as she walked down the aisle, ready to say I do, she saw something that made her world stop. And in that moment, her perfect love story came crashing down. Would she go through with the wedding? Or would she turn her back on a love built on secrets? Buckle up, because this is one story you won't see coming. Subscribe to Savannah Storytime and let's dive in. The air inside the bank's corporate office was thick with the rhythmic tapping of keyboards and the distant murmur of ringing phones. Employees moved with practiced urgency, their faces buried in reports, their minds preoccupied with numbers and deadlines. At the far end of the open office space, Motunrayo, short for Moten, sat behind her sleek wooden desk, her fingers moving swiftly over her laptop keyboard. Her sharp, focused eyes flickered across the financial reports displayed on the screen. She had no time for distractions. But distractions always found a way. Tolu, her colleague, leaned over her desk, resting her elbows on the polished surface with a knowing smirk. Moten, you need to take a break, she said, her voice laced with amusement. You're always working. When was the last time you even went on a date? Moten barely acknowledged her, her fingers still typing. Her expression remained indifferent, as though the question didn't warrant a response. Seriously, Tolu pressed, tilting her head. Even robots get an oil change. You just keep grinding like someone chasing a promotion that doesn't exist. A scoff escaped Moten's lips. She finally paused, tapping her perfectly manicured fingers against the desk. Tolu, I don't have time for all that, she said flatly. Besides, have you seen the kind of men out there? Broke, jobless, no ambition. I can't settle for less. Tolu rolled her eyes, arms folding across her chest. Not every man is broke, Madam Standards. You just don't give anyone a chance. Moten shut her laptop with a soft click and leaned back in her chair, exhaling as if the conversation itself was exhausting. Because I know what I want, she stated firmly. And trust me, if I ever meet a man, he has to be everything. Rich, classy, and without baggage. Her voice carried the confidence of someone who had repeated this mantra too many times to count. She wasn't just stating a preference, she was declaring a principle. And so, the pattern continued. She had turned down suitors left and right. Some, she rejected with a polite nod, a tight-lipped smile. Most, she dismissed with sharp sarcasm, not bothering to sugarcoat her disinterest. Too short. Too loud. Too ordinary. Too desperate. Even her closest friends had learned to stop suggesting potential partners. But all that was about to change when her friends dragged her to a nightclub after work. The bass from the speakers pulsed through the dimly lit nightclub, vibrating the floors beneath designer heels and expensive loafers. The air was thick with the mingling scent of luxury perfumes, burning cigars, and freshly poured champagne. Laughter and hushed conversations wove through the music, creating a symphony of wealth and indulgence. Moten sat comfortably in the VIP lounge, her posture poised but detached. She wasn't here for the atmosphere, the drinks, or the music. She was here because her friends had insisted, dragged her out after another long week buried in bank documents and business meetings. She swallowed the golden liquid in her glass, watching the bubbles rise lazily to the surface. Around her, Aisha and the others swayed to the music, their dresses shimmering under the neon glow, their hands wrapped around exotic cocktails. "At least you're here," Aisha teased, nudging her side. "You need to loosen up sometimes." Motun smacked, barely lifting her gaze from her glass. "I came to watch you girls misbehave. Not to join in." Aisha rolled her eyes but said nothing more. She knew Motun, always composed, always in control. But someone else was watching her. Across the club, in the more secluded VIP section, a man sat with effortless authority. Adisa. He wasn't talking, wasn't laughing like the others at his table. He simply observed, his fingers resting lightly around his glass as he watched her. She didn't notice him, but he noticed everything about her. The way she rarely smiled, the way she spoke without unnecessary gestures, the way she scanned the room as if already unimpressed by everything in it. Adisa didn't approach her, he didn't need to. Instead, he turned slightly, murmuring something to the man beside him. A silent command. The friend nodded, stood up, and melted into the crowd. Minutes later, at Motun's table, one of her so-called friends felt the weight of crisp naira notes slipping into her hand. The temptation was brief, the decision instant. With a subtle glance around, she tapped a few buttons on her phone and passed it discreetly to the waiting hand. The exchange was over before Motun even noticed. Somewhere in the depths of his phone, a notification appeared. New Instagram handle received. Adisa glanced at the screen and smirked. The game had begun. The night was quiet, save for the faint hum of Motun's air conditioner. Her apartment, dimly lit by the soft glow of her bedside lamp, felt unusually still. She had just slipped into bed, exhausted from another long day at the bank, when her phone vibrated beside her. A notification. Her brows furrowed as she unlocked the screen. A message request. At King Adisa, "Hello, beautiful. You don't know me, but I saw you last night, and I haven't stopped thinking about you." She stared at the message for a moment. Another admirer. Normally, she wouldn't bother. Her DMs were filled with men trying their luck, some with lazy one-liners, others with desperate flattery. But this one was different. There was a quiet confidence in his words. No emojis. No over-the-top compliments. Just simple, direct, intentional. Curious, she tapped on his profile. A blue check mark. Verified. Hundreds of followers. Crisp, high-quality photos, luxury cars, 5-star hotels, private jet interiors. Business meetings in high-rise offices. A few shots of him in tailored suits, seated with important-looking men. He was tall, clean-shaven, effortlessly sophisticated. She smirked. Interesting. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard before she finally typed back. "And you are?" That was all it took. The response came almost immediately. A smooth introduction, laced with just the right amount of intrigue. He told her he was an investor, a businessman with interests in multiple industries. He asked about her work, her interest, nothing too personal, just enough to keep her engaged. One message turned into a conversation. A conversation turned into hours of chatting. Hours turned into nights filled with late-night calls. And Motun. She found herself looking forward to them. Adisa was unlike any man she had spoken to. Charming. Witty. Intelligent. He had a way of making her laugh, of making her feel special. He never asked for anything, never pushed, never pressured. He was patient, letting the conversations flow naturally. And then came the video calls. She had expected hesitation, maybe even reluctance. Most men in her DMs avoided calls, hiding behind text messages and voice notes. But Adisa? He called her effortlessly, his voice smooth, his presence commanding. Each time the screen lit up, she saw him, always dressed well, always composed. His smile was warm, his gaze intense. He had the face of a man who knew his worth. But one thing stood out. He never showed his full body. The camera was always angled, framing only his upper torso, his face clear and confident. Even in the few pictures he sent, his posture was perfect, his stance strong. There were only a handful of images where his legs were visible, always standing beside a car or seated on a polished chair in what looked like an office. He had everything she wanted. 3 months into their online romance, the glow of Motun's phone screen illuminated her face as she lay in bed, the late-night silence of her apartment wrapping around her. Outside, Lagos was still alive, cars honking, generators humming, voices echoing from distant streets, but inside, all she could hear was Adisa's voice through the video call. It had become their routine. After long hours at the bank, she would come home, kick off her heels, and lose herself in their conversations. Adisa was her escape from the stress, from the pressure of family and society telling her to settle down. He understood her, made her laugh, made her feel like the only woman in the world. Tonight, however, was different. His face, as usual, filled most of the screen, his deep voice soothing as he spoke. The connection was strong, the lighting around him dim but warm. His eyes held something unreadable, something almost nervous. Then, he exhaled deeply. "Motun, there's something I've been meaning to ask you." She smiled, adjusting the pillow behind her. "What is it?" For the first time since they met, she saw hesitation in his eyes. Then, slowly, he reached off-screen and returned with a small, black velvet box. He opened it. Inside, a dazzling diamond ring glistened under the soft lighting. Her breath hitched. "I know this isn't the way most people propose, but our love has never been ordinary," he said, his voice deep and sincere. "You are everything I have ever wanted, Motun. I don't need to wait any longer. Marry me." The world around her blurred. She had imagined this moment many times, but never like this, never through a phone screen. Yet, the weight of his words, the depth of his gaze, made it feel as real as if he were standing right in front of her. A part of her hesitated. Was it too soon? She had never met him in person, but she had seen him, spoken to him for hours on end. He had shown her glimpses of his life, his wealth, his generosity, his kindness. She had fallen in love with him, with the man he was. And now, he was offering her everything. Her fingers trembled as she touched her screen, as if she could reach through and take the ring from his hand. Then, finally, she whispered, "Yes. Yes, Adisa, I'll marry you." His smile widened, relief washing over his features. "You won't regret this, my love. I'll take care of everything for the wedding, all the expenses, all the planning. You just need to show up with your family. I want our first meeting to be on the most beautiful day of our lives." Motun's heart swelled. No stress, no endless wedding planning, just a perfect ceremony, a perfect beginning. It felt like a dream. A fairy tale. One she had waited for her entire life. And soon, she would finally meet the man who had given it to her. The air was thick with the scent of fresh roses and expensive perfume. Soft violins played in the background, blending seamlessly with the hushed murmur of guests seated in rows of gold-trimmed chairs. Chandeliers cast a warm, golden glow over the hall, illuminating every perfect detail, the towering wedding cake, the pristine white petals lining the aisle, the hopeful faces turned toward the entrance. And then, she appeared. Motun stepped through the grand doors, her gown cascading in waves of elegance, the diamond-studded veil catching the light as she took her first step forward. A vision of grace. Perfection. The woman who had waited so long for this moment. Her father's arm was firm around hers as they walked slowly, deliberately, toward the altar. Her heart pounded, not from fear, but from the sheer magnitude of the day. This was it, the beginning of forever. But then, she saw him. Seated. At first, it barely registered. Perhaps he was waiting for her to reach him before rising to take her hand. But as they moved closer, the whispers began. Soft at first, then spreading like ripples on water. A shift in the air. A tightening in her chest. The glances exchanged between guests. The barely concealed gasps. And then, as if a curtain had been pulled back on a cruel joke, the truth crashed into her. Adisa was not waiting to stand. He was not going to walk to her. Because he couldn't. Her steps faltered. The bouquet in her hand suddenly felt like a weight dragging her down. Her mind raced, trying to process the impossible. No. This wasn't happening. Her lips parted, but the words barely escaped. Adisa, what is this? He held her gaze, steady and calm, as if he had already braced himself for this moment. I was going to tell you, Motun. The word tilted. Her breath came in short, sharp bursts. What happened to the pictures I saw? The ones with your legs. He exhaled slowly. I paid experts to Photoshop them. Silence. Complete, deafening silence. The room, once filled with the hum of anticipation, now felt like a void swallowing her whole. Her vision blurred, not from tears, but from the sheer weight of realization. He was rich. He was charming. But he was crippled. And he lied. Memories of their conversations flashed before her, his perfectly calculated angles on video calls, his refusal to meet in person until the engagement was official, the pictures, the texts, the promises. Everything had been tailored to fit her dreams. A perfect illusion. Her hands trembled, fingers curling into fists. She had envisioned a love story where her husband would walk beside her, dance with her under city lights, sweep her off her feet in every sense of the word. This was not what she imagined. Not at all. She stood frozen, her mind unraveling. The weight of 1,000 gazes pressed down on her. Friends, family, colleagues, waiting. Watching. What now? Would she walk away, leaving him humiliated before an entire hall of witnesses? Would she turn her back on the man who had given her everything, except the one thing he could never change? Or would she stay? Stay, despite the deception. Despite the shock. Despite the love story she thought she was walking into turning into something unrecognizable. Motun's heart pounded as she turned her gaze toward the sea of expectant faces. Waiting. Thanks for watching this incredible story. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, and share so our channel can reach more people. And now, the question is yours to answer. If you were in Motun's shoes, what would you do? Would you walk away from a man who had it all except the ability to walk? Or would you stay and accept the life you never expected? I'd like to know your opinion in the comments below.